is our salad of the night. It's our strawberry feta salad. It also has candied walnuts on the side. I know there are nut allergies, so feel free to grab some if you'd like. It's made with arugula and spinach as well as red onion, so enjoy.
Mm-mm.
Very yummy.
I'm gonna need that business card later.
Alright, so we're gonna start off with an icebreaker.
I guess I'll start though if no one wants to. My name is Gideon, and creatively I am a dancer, and I do mostly hip hop and step. Step is something that I did a lot of growing up, and then I kind of found other dance styles along the way. I'm part of a step team called the Players Club Entertainment, based out of the Bronx, but I'm from Jersey. And I'm part of a competition dance team that's based in Rahway, New Jersey, from the Hive Dance Studio. And I guess one thing that creatively that I've been inspired by this year, I would say just my my dance teammates. I'm really inspired by them because not only are they on this competition team with me, but they're exploring what it means to be a creative, what it means to be a dancer, whether it's commercially or just being creative to be creative. A lot of, most recently there was a teammate of mine that came out with a dance concept where they were, I don't really know how to pronounce their name, I might get it wrong, but Raul Alejandro, they used one of their songs and they did a heels piece to it, super dope. They had only been doing heels choreo for like a year, but for them to put a whole dance concept together, get some friends together to film, produce the whole shebang, and they're only 22. So I remember being 22 and not really knowing how to do any of that, and so yeah, super inspired by them to push their creative boundaries, like at least in my perspective, like so early on.
That's so cool. I think heels is like the coolest dance ever. Oh my god! Anytime I see it,
It's no joke.
I could never do it, but when I see it, I'm like, that's so impressive. It's really cool. That's awesome.
Okay, yeah, a little about myself. So I'm a professional model. I moved from Maryland to New York to go to college about 10 years ago. Woo. And yeah, I got signed during college to a top agency. And that's how my career started. You know, I since then have modeled for like Skims, Gap, Serena Williams, her brand. I think I'm in Macy's right now. You might be able to find me in Macy's, and maybe we'll probably find me online for Target.
Yeah, I was about to say definitely.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna see me for Target.
You look
Not
familiar.
registered.
Yeah, I was like on the subways. Like my picture was like pasted all over the subway for like months for Sol de Janeiro. So I've just done a lot of cool like brands and you know, really built a name for myself in the fashion world and fashion industry. And I guess now, I wouldn't say I'm pivoting, I'm still modeling, but like I've definitely been focusing on other things. So I was talking a little bit earlier about my community for like models, up and coming models who want to like learn how to navigate the industry, because I felt like that was something that I was missing personally when I first started modeling. I feel like there wasn't a lot of direction. Like I had good agents, but they didn't necessarily like give me the tools that I feel like I needed to really grow in the industry. And you know, also social media is a big part of that. And so I kind of had to learn how to use my social media to grow on my own as well. And like that's kind of where my background with fashion PR definitely helped and kind of propelled me forward because I understood like how it works. But yeah, I'm working on a collective called Model House where we do like monthly different like panels, events for models because we don't necessarily have like spaces where we're able to connect and learn and figure out, you know, what's legit, what's not legit, you know, how do you stay safe as a model, like how do you not get taken advantage of? And so that's like kind of been my next step and my next focus is like building that and getting the panels started and things like that. So, yeah.
That's really cool.
Okay, I'll go. My name is Jacob, you know, New York born and raised. So you're? Creatively, I am a part-time photographer and I'm also a part-time manager for a brand called The After Party. I am the brand partnership and sponsor coordinator, basically responsible for all the partners we you know, again, collab with, all the sponsors, whether it's clothing brand, liquor brands, cosmetic brands, you name it. We throw a bunch of, you know, cool events, panel events. We throw an annual party. We just had that early February, so that's good. That's our 3rd year doing this.
Hello again. My name's Kenzie. My pronouns are she, they. I creatively, what do I do? What field am I in? A little bit about me. I'm an independent filmmaker, writer, director, producer. And then I also am a creative director. I partner with independent musicians really early in their career to help produce their music videos, run the visual aspect of their album rollouts and whatnot. So most specifically, I work with an artist named Emmy Jo, and I work as her full-time creative director. We worked on her debut album together, and it was a dream come true. And then my main focus is film. So I've been telling stories since I was a kid. When I was 9 years old, I knew that was like what I wanted to do. I saw Wicked, as most theater kids do. I saw Wicked the play. And I just was so moved as a child, watching, you know, in the very back nosebleeds of a touring company where it's really like nosebleeds. It's not just like the balcony at a normal theater. And I remember jumping to my feet as a child with tears streaming down my face at the end of Act 1. So as we've all now seen the movie, I'm sure, Defying Gravity, and I was just clapping and clapping and clapping, tears rolling down my face, and I stood there for 15 minutes staring at the stage, and my grandma and my mom, they go to the bathroom, they grab snacks, they come back, and I'm still just there crying, and they're like, "Are you good? Like, are you okay?" And I just remember turning to my grandmother with tears just still falling down my face, and I said, "I'm gonna do that one day. I wanna tell stories like that. I wanna do something that matters." And so that's kind of my whole focus as a creative and a filmmaker as well. I have an independent production company that's in really early stages, and we are really focused on every story we tell being rooted in authenticity, and most specifically within that realm, making sure that we're bringing voices to the table who are often overlooked and even more so often do not get a seat at the table from every aspect of life. So yeah, that's kind of what I do, and it brings me a lot of joy, which is very exciting and wonderful, and we're working on some really great stuff this next year, which has me very excited for what's to come.
So what my lovely host is about to serve you guys is our vegan okra. Traditionally, okra is made with salted cod, but today I made it with oyster mushrooms. So enjoy.
I'd say it kind of starts off with just a lot of conversations. I feel like I'm in the conversation stage right now. Like I have the idea, I know what I want it to be. I've been talking to other models about it. I know that it's something that's needed in the industry. Like I know that it's something when I say like, you know, a space for models to learn from each other, to connect with each other. It's just something that's very appealing to models in general. And so I think it starts with conversation. I went to CultureCon in October, and that was really inspiring, hearing from the founder of how really this whole idea started in her living room, and she was just with some friends, creatives, talking about like, you know, sharing information. Like, what do we know? How can we help each other get to the next stage of our career? And I feel like that was really inspiring for me, and I kind of put it in the context of models. You know, like there are certain model events, they particularly happen around New York Fashion Week, but that's just twice a year, and I feel like, you know, that's not enough for building like meaningful relationships just twice a year. I feel like, you know, and that's where the idea came from, to have something like monthly, whether it be like a workshop teaching, like posing and things like that, and you're also connecting with other models. And I feel like even right now, a big way that models are getting the information about like different castings and opportunities is like through like group chats on Instagram, you know, like they have the Instagram community like tabs where you can like send messages, and like, or they're just like group chats in general, like iMessage group chats. And I feel like that's a way, like, you know, I see that there's a need for that because people are creating it. But I think, you know, for me, I kind of imagine it just on a larger scale. And so what does it look like when we have like real experts, model agencies, when we have creative directors, stylists also sharing all of their information, casting directors on like, you know, what are they looking for when they're casting models, you know, what sets models apart. And so it's really just about like having that information. You know, I have it because I've been working in the industry for so long. I know there's other people that probably know more than me that have been working in the industry longer, and like bringing those people together to just have a conversation. So whether it's a dinner like this, or if it's a happy hour, or like a more formal panel, or if it's just a workshop, like really, I think for me, I feel very much like obligated to share what I've learned. And maybe that's me being like, you know, the eldest sister of 4, you know, like I feel like I love to just nurture people and like share what I've learned. I've never been like a gatekeeper. I don't love that term. Like I don't love learning something, you know, struggling, and then feeling like the next generation, well, I struggle, so they need to struggle too, or like I figured it out on my own, so they should figure it out on their own too. I always felt like that was weird, and it's just like, if I learned something, why not just like, it's as easy as just sharing the information. And so what I'm doing is like just coming up with like a more formal way to just like share that information to others, because it's important. I think I answered the question.
It's very important to pay it forward. A lot of people who've gone through that experience of not having a mentor or not having resources publicly available to them, they get bitter, jaded, and then still, it's a curse, it's a trauma, and you know, some people can't see beyond that. And you talk about when the next generation comes up, because there's always be someone coming up, right? And they don't want to help. Breaking the cycle, breaking that, you know, breaking the railroad, because that is a train that's going to keep going and going and going if you don't, you know, you stop it at the at the cusp. You save someone from a lot of heartache and trouble, and like you said, if you pay it forward, they will also do it as well. Y'all remember that movie, Pay It Forward? This was a good movie. Such a great movie. But I think that's one of the inspiration for me personally. I think about my journey career-wise, going back to career, never having a guide, never having a mentor, not knowing what I wanted to do early on, thinking I know I wanted to do, and then ended up changing it. I knew it would have been different if I had someone kind of coaching me. I knew I would have changed the trajectory where I was going if I knew what was available, you know. And I think for people of marginalized communities, those who are not represented, those who are abused, those who are mistreated, those who are not understood, that's something that we have to go through, unfortunately. And it's up to us to actually to avoid that and change the narrative.
Yeah, 100%.
So.
And I think continuing to like not only push yourself, but like also then hold the community you build accountable to continue to do that too. I think from my side of things, like with film, no matter what you do, it's a community, because it takes at least 3 people to make a film, right? Like you need someone running the camera, you need someone directing it, you need someone in front of it. But in reality, it takes so many more. And so I think with that, like on my side of things, it's bringing people into those spaces who don't often like have that accessibility or have never been on a set in that capacity, and trying to find opportunities to come together and learn and teach, but then also take it a step further and see like, okay, within the stories that we're telling, how can we make a difference in someone who's watching this, right? Like if you're showing something, you're making something to then put out, how can you hopefully impact someone in the long run? I remember as a kid watching shows with queer characters before I was out, and I just felt so drawn to it, and I didn't really understand why at the time, but it was because I didn't fully understand my own sexuality, but I knew that I had this show that made me feel seen. And in turn, I found community that also consumed that same art. And I think that's something really beautiful about what film can do, and what makes me so passionate about like telling stories from marginalized perspectives, is because it might reach a kid in the middle of nowhere who feels like they don't deserve to live anymore because of how they identify or how they look. And they might see it and realize they can go to the next day because someone sees them. And I think that really, in a way, even without necessarily having a direct line of communication to someone who may see something you do, even from, you know, photography perspective or fashion perspective or dance even, it can fuel and foster community in the long term and inspire someone to then take action into their own hands, you know, kind of similarly to your experiences with modeling. Like, these are the things that I've learned, and I want to push that into the next realm. You may inspire people you never even meet, and I think there's something really beautiful about that.
There's growth and then there's scaling, right? Everyone's in a period of growth, but after a certain point, once you reach a stage, you probably just kind of stale. You can balance each other. Now, how can you scale it? Just basically expand upon it. And thank God for that corporate experience at Citibank. Like, yeah, all these terminologies, and I just think about it full circle when I'm doing these things. But again, the whole point of the after party was to just to create a space for people, Black and brown communities, get into fashion, or if you're already in fashion and you feel like you're stuck, what can you do next? If you have an entrepreneur or your own creativity you want to push, who can else you can meet that can connect you to someone else or help you reach your goal? The attendees at the after parties range from medias, news outlets, news coverage, podcasts. You got content creators, influencers. You got designers. You got other partnership managers, sponsorships. All those. You never know who you're gonna meet. And the beauty of it is that at the end of the day, no matter how many tickets are sold, how many people attend, people come out, they love it. They're always wondering what's next. And this is our third year, and the one thing I can say is that I don't see the same people twice. Well, there was one person. There's a couple people. We got our core fans that have been there so far 3 times in a row. But I always see new faces. So I like the fact that, because it means that we are still expanding, that it's reaching new audience, and that at the end of the day, there is something there. No matter how successful it is and or sometimes, you throw an event, you do a project, it may not go the way you want it to, but just knowing that people are still paying attention to it, knowing it's still gravitating to people's eyes, catching their attention, they still want to be a part of. At the end of the day, it shows like, oh, there's a value here.
Yeah.
There's something that there's a need for it. It's not just a want, it's a need. And, at the end of the day, you can't do it by yourself.
That part, yeah.
You can't. You need.
Takes a village.
You need people to believe in you. You need people that believes in your vision. It's not about the dollars. All the money is important, but it's really to support the community, like you said. At the end of the day, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
The pyramids wasn't built by one person. Everyone has a block on their shoulder, and they can put it in the right place strategically, and then it becomes what you make out of it.
Yeah.
You're gonna make a wonder.
There's a band that I listen to. They're queer, Sammy Ray and the Friends, and their like tagline at the end of every show is, you know, we hope you come back next time, then you join us again, and that you bring a friend. And the whole idea is that every time you go back, you bring someone new, and that if they go back, they bring someone new. And it built this world of music that is solely built around community. And I think that kind of applies to what you were saying. I think that applies to all the things we do, is this idea of bringing in the people, not only that you know, that are your friends, but then encouraging and creating and cultivating a space that encourages people to want to come back or talk about it enough to make someone else want to come. I think there's a lot of beauty in that.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. That's kind of how the whole like competition dance thing happened for me. Like I said before, I was kind of like cherry picking going to dance class, and then I felt like I kind of needed to get more of a hold on myself, and so I chose to consistently go to dance class, and then I started seeing a lot of the same people. I started loitering, I guess, as creatives do, I guess, in any space, and that's how I got to meet a lot of my dance friends. I kind of just hung out, see who would stay, and talk to the choreographers that were teaching these classes, and in that sense, I feel like that's part of why I kept coming back too. I had been going to my home studio for a while, but it's also a newer studio. I think it was like founded in like 2018. I could be wrong, but like I still consider it kind of like a baby in a sense of like a studio, when you compare it to like BDC or, you know, something that's long standing. And for whatever reason, last year, a lot of folks started showing up, and like we were all kind of like very like-minded. We're kind of new to the game, but we're like so ready to just like commit to training or commit to just figuring out how we can push our creative boundaries, and then we became friends, and then we stuck around, and now we're hanging out all the time, but even in the past year, we've kind of found other ways to be creative, and it's not always together, but we find a way, or we at least reach out and say like, hey, like I miss you, like let's get together, let's do like another get together sometime, you know. And I think definitely from like a selfish point of view, like dance is what like I kind of use dance to like help propel myself into other avenues, whether it's like finding friends post college or like just like continuing to have an outlet. Like I'm not really using dance to, I guess, like push myself into like another like another branch of income, or, you know, like I'm not really using it as a business move right now. As those opportunities come, great. I'm humble, but I know that I'm a talented individual, so like I guess I kind of teeter between like I'm awesome and I have imposter syndrome. So yeah, so you know, wherever that balance is, I always have valued like having community. So a lot of my creativity, I feel like, doesn't even come from the dance necessarily. It comes from like, how do we keep this vibe going? Like dance is kind of like where we found each other, but like I'm not friends with you guys because of dance. Like I'm friends because like we value our time together. We value we value how we push each other, or how we show up for each other. Some of my friends are like getting into choreographing more, so I'll show up to their dance class, you know, like, okay, dance class is $4 compared to like a regular dance class, which is $20. Cool. You know, like that's accessible. That's what makes people show up. But I feel like the extra step is just showing up. And so figuring out how I can always do that for my friends, or even just hosting something. I feel like we were talking about that, like, even though that's something that I like to do, I think that sometimes it just takes hosting something to make everyone feel seen, feel like they're part of the space, whether that space is at the studio or it's at someone's house or we're just hanging out, you know? So I think that's where it's not just about like the creative space that that you, I guess, like put a tagline on yourself, you know? It's the soft skills too. It's the everything, I guess.
It's like showing up and supporting.
In any capacity, across the board. Something I love doing when we wrap is to get everyone together, whether we're going to someone's house or we're going to my place or we're going to a bar, and I get everybody a drink that does drink just as a thank you, to like be together and celebrate the end of it. And we invite people who've already wrapped ahead of time, because I think it's just something that, like, again, it's all about community and showing up for one another and experiencing like each other outside of the creative space, even when you are still talking about that thing or are still adjacent to that space. I think there's so much joy that can come from just existing together, even if it's not in that creative space, but you're still with those people that you're building that community with. That's deep. I could get into that one. Oh man. When specifically in a creative director sense, when I'm working with musicians, collaborating with musicians to then in turn execute their vision while still maintaining my own individuality, or at least just what I feel and know as the filmmaker of the conversation is the best direction for the visual aspect, is really hard. It's really hard to maintain that. Sometimes you get an artist who is really open to anything and everything, and sometimes you get ones who are very set in, this is exactly how I want it to look and this is exactly what you need to do. And then other times you have almost this in-between of being really open and receptive to collaboration and dialogue, and then as you get into like the final product and you give them, you know, passes of edits, it turns into, this isn't exactly what you said you were going to do, or this isn't this and this and this, and then all of a sudden there's this really insane tension that occurs, and navigating that is really hard. And I think in my experience, what it has come down to is finding a way to meet in the middle, finding a way to meet a compromise, bless you, finding a way to come to a compromise where both parties, or however many parties are involved, feel that they're all contributing to the final product and seeing their idea of it represented. And that's not an easy thing to accomplish in any capacity. Oh my God, it's really hard. But what you do within that is it builds a lot of trust, and sometimes that trust is broken, and then you kind of have to rebuild it as you go. So I think that you just have to know that ultimately you're not going to get everything you want within like what you think is your vision from the film perspective, but at the same time recognizing like, okay, I may not get every single thing that I know is right for this. However, there are these 3 things that need to be here in order for this finished product to stay true to who I am and what we agreed upon. And I think that has kind of been something that has really pushed me in just like how to navigate those things. You have to be like a conflict resolution therapist almost sometimes, and it's like, how the hell do you do this? I don't know. Especially on like the really low independent level where there's not a lot of like reps involved. It's really just like you and them, and like you're really just having that conversation face to face. There's no one like providing that information. There's no like mediator that you can say, hey, can you communicate this? It's really like you and the artist, and you're gonna get into it. And sometimes that's awful.
Right. 'Cause
Sometimes
then
it's really hard.
seems super personal. Or it is.
Yeah, and it's a situation in which like it isn't, but it is, and it can be taken that way sometimes. A lot of ego comes into it, and it's just a really interesting thing. I don't know if there is a right way to go about it, other than hearing and trying to find a way to kind of balance within it all. It's very interesting. I have dealt with this very recently. It's very fresh.
Interesting, because I feel like I'm not super well versed in like the film industry, but I know there's like producers and there's the director, and then there's the creative director, and then there's the actors, and I feel like they all have their vision of like what everything's supposed to look like, and there's a lot of, I guess, conversations that have to happen for everybody to get on the same page.
Yes.
You know, like I
Yeah.
can only imagine.
Yeah, so right now we're in pre-production for my short film, and it's that exact thing, is we're like bringing people onto the team of like being really clear of like, this is the vision. Especially I have the advantage of I wrote the script, I'm directing it, and I'm the one producing it. Like I'm really doing this as I'm putting out my own work, so I kind of have that advantage of this is the vision we're going with, but at the same time wanting to give people their own individuality within that, and seeing like within that realm, how can you bring something that I may not have recognized beforehand? It can be actually a really eye-opening experience as well. Like as a director working with actors, and having been an actor previously, that's what I studied in college. You learn so much that sometimes, you know, you can bring that to your director. And I want who I'm working with to feel that in the process they can bring it to me and say, hey, I have this idea, could we try it? Or what are your thoughts on trying X, Y, Z? And that is such a positive conversation. It's when you get into the final cuts of things where it's like, all of a sudden, I want to pivot the entire vision. That's when it becomes like a really crazy situation. And in a more intense production process where there's, you know, in the short film process, like you can pull rank of, well, I'm the producer. At the end of the day, like this is the one we're going with. But in these situations where it's like one-on-one and it's me working with an individual artist, the rank that is pulled isn't really either, because it's their project at the end of the day, even if it's my project too. So it's a very interesting situation, and they're vastly different, even though there's overlap.
Wow. I feel like you have to be a good communicator.
Very much. Communication skill is key. Do you find that in any capacity, like with like photographers you work with or stylists? Or
That's a good question. Yeah, like I feel like, you know, for a lot of like the collaborative shoots I'll do, you know, oftentimes I'm like selective with the type of photographers I work with, because, you know, I'd say I have an idea of what I might want the shoot to look like, but I also love like hearing a photographer's idea of what they want the shoot to look like, because we're both equally benefiting off of doing the shoot. Like, you know, we're going to be able to put it on our Instagrams, add it to our portfolios. Want to make sure it's something that we're all able to use and that feels like good, you know. And then that also like the stylist too, you know, we have to think about like, okay, what type of clothes are they putting me in, like, you know, like does it match the vibe that we're thinking about? And then it all ties into the makeup and hair artist. And so yeah, I mean, I think you know, the communication piece definitely comes into play, because you got to make sure everybody's on the same page when you first start, and so that, you know, at the end of the day, like whatever you're doing, you're coming together to do looks cohesive and like looks good at the end of the day. I feel like that's the goal, something that's usable. But yeah, to get there, I feel like there's conversations that need to be had, but I think that is why I'm a little bit more selective at this point in my career with like who I'm working with. You know, I want to make sure it's a positive experience for everybody, and that it's something that like can actually propel everybody's career forward, and you know, will look good in their portfolios and things like that.
Do you, I'm just so curious because I don't know much about that side of it. Do you get a lot of say when it comes to who's shooting or like who's styling you? Or is it like, hey, Janelle, you are booking XYZ and this is this is the director for the shoot and this is who's shooting it and you can pick your style. Is it something like, how does that work?
No, so I mean, if let's say like I'm booked to be on set for a brand, right? All I know is that I'm booked to be on set for that brand. I don't know who the stylist is. I don't know who the photographer is. Sometimes they'll send a call sheet. Maybe the night before they send a call sheet, if you're lucky, where you can see like, okay, I'm going to be working with this person, this photographer, and that's nice when I get that. But you know, I don't expect it. I don't always expect it. I mean, that's just, you know.
Crazy.
Yeah, I would
That's
say
number one most important thing.
And sometimes, you know, I think maybe my agents will get them, but like I don't always see it, you know. So it's very interesting, you know. I don't always know like what I'm walking into on set, but like I think a part.
Almost the last to know.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Usually the last to know that I'm confirmed. Like usually, you know, that's the tough part about modeling is like you kind of are on call, you know, like you're kind of at the whim of like, hey, you got this tomorrow, you got to go to this casting tomorrow, or like you have 2 days, you booked this, so like always on the go. But it's something I actually had to learn early on in my career is that like having to let go of the image that I had of myself because it's really not up to you how you look on set, which sounds really weird. People would think, okay, as a model, like, you know, you have a say over how your makeup is done or how your hair is done. That's just not the case, especially when you're being paid by a big brand. The brand has the idea. Yeah.
That does make sense to an extent.
And it does. And I think that's what separates like professional models from maybe like an Instagram model, where like an Instagram model has full creative direction over the photographer, you know, their looks. They have like brands sending them things to wear. They can put it together their own way, but like I don't have a say over what I wear on set unless I show up, right.
You almost, in a way, this feels weird to even say, but in a way, you're like a Barbie doll.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like
which is really fascinating.
You're there to embody what the brand or the designer like kind of has in mind for you, and you're just kind of a mannequin.
Yeah, you're expected
know?
to be kind of like a chameleon in that
Yeah.
sense. Just like, this is what we're going with. This is what you're going to wear.
Yep.
Do your thing, but also our thing.
Our thing. Yeah, they definitely give you direction.
And their thing takes priority over your thing.
Absolutely.
It's nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
but it's also, the question I would like to pose to you is, have you ever encountered, or what do you do when you are asked to partake in a shoot, and even though you don't have the, what do you call it, call sheet, call action? Call sheet, and you don't know what you're walking into, but you go there and it conflicts with you morally, ethically, what do you do? Or
Yeah,
That's good. I like that.
Have you
That's
had
a
to-
really.
Yeah.
I
Have
think
you had
that
to come
really
across
ties
that?
into
Yeah.
this idea of how do you maintain individuality with that.
Yeah. I mean, to start, I think with your question, have I ever like walked in blind on something? I've never gotten to the point where I've walked onto set and I'm just like, oh, what the hell's going on? Like, I feel like that's the protection that an agency, a good agency should give you that. You know, they should know, okay, like, they're going to send you to people who are professional, and you know, a good agency also knows like your boundaries. So like they asked when I first got signed, like, would you do a nude shoot? And for me, the answer was no. Like, I'm good. I do a lot of lingerie. I've done like bikinis and stuff, but like nude just, it wasn't something I would want to do. And so like they knew that up front. And so I was never put in that position. But now, like, on the flip side of when I'm, like, planning my own creative shoots for my portfolio and, like, I'm reaching out to photographers or responding to photographers who are looking to work with me, that's different because I have more of a creative direction, but it's also tough because I'm doing it usually without my agency. So I've run into that problem before I've gotten onto set where, like, the photographer is sending me their vision. And, like, this is really something that, like, has happened before where the photographer is like, we want you to be in a bathtub and you're gonna have chocolate dripping off of you. And I was like,
What?
I don't think so. I don't think that's what we're gonna do. And he was very adamant on that. And I was like, okay, well, no, that's not something that I want to do. And so I cut it off right there. But even like, people get weird. Like, after that, Instagram called me like multiple times to see why I didn't want to shoot, and like made it a bigger thing than it needed to be. And I'm just like, I don't like your vision. Like, that's why I don't want to shoot. I don't want to waste your time or my time being in a bathtub with chocolate dripping over me. Like, that's just not, it's not it. So I kind of like, I've had to, I've cut it off before I've actually gotten there and like walked into a situation. But those things definitely happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Well, and it's hard to point because you're expected to do a job, right? But also at what cost to your own like beliefs and standing. I've been dealing with that recently with a project of like we signed off on something really early on and we delivered on that in our first edit, and then they completely pivoted what they wanted it to be. And it was something that I no longer felt was something I felt comfortable even having my name on. And I had this really, it's been, a couple months now of back and forth and trying to find a way to meet in the middle where they feel content with what they're receiving and that it is reaching exactly how they want it to look. And in turn, that I feel okay from a moral perspective, I am okay keeping my name on this, even if I'm not going to be posting it on my own socials because I'm not happy with the finished product, but am I comfortable keeping my name on it? And that's been a really weird, I talked to my therapist about it. It was a really weird ethical dilemma, especially because it was a more political piece. And like trying to kind of navigate that has been really interesting. And you have to really grapple with at what point am I willing to walk away? And sometimes you don't know the answer to that until you're right in the moment. So I think that was an awesome thing to bring up. From the dance perspective, obviously, especially in like a dance troupe, right? Like the whole goal is to look the same in a sense. I mean, there's solo moments. That's how it kind of is in dance too, to my, understanding and consumption of it. So to go back to the original question of like maintaining your individuality within that, how do you find that? I ask mostly because I am not a dancer. I do not have that skill set, but I often wonder, like, sometimes there are just dancers within a troupe who will stand out more, but not even in an intentional, like I'm doing it to show off way. It just like is something that kind of radiates. Is that something you feel you experience or struggle with or have dealt with in any capacity?
I guess it's more of a shout out to my dance team in that. So the name of the team is called the Wannabes, and so that is like, I don't really know like the lore, let's say, behind like why they're called the Wannabes, but my interpretation is, it's this call to action to always figure out or like aspire to figure out who you want to be and like how you want to grow, and like that's something that's been top of mind, like even when we started the season, just like what are your goals, how are we gonna support you in that, and then when it comes to set building and like creating the pieces that we put on stage, it definitely is a balance. Like we've talked about that a little bit now. Like there's the choreography that's set, but then there's always an invitation to still be you in it, even when we audition for like certain pieces of the set. Like there's different songs, and so we'll be introduced to choreography that's going to may or may not get used in the set, but is the vibe of every song. And like no one's looking for perfection, but they are looking for, do you embody what I want in this? So I guess that's where the creativeness really jumps out, and the individuality, because sometimes they don't know what they want.
Right.
They just know the vibe, but they all know how we all dance, but the audition process is that chance to kind of, maybe you didn't push the last time, maybe this time like there's something that really resonates with you, and like this is your time to shine.
Right.
So that, you know, it's so in that sense, individuality is appreciated, it's invited, um, it's something that we never stop pushing. Um, sure, we'll have notes, like certain things just need to be more in sync. Um, but we definitely, um, if it calls for it, we'll kind of call to certain people for specific parts.
Yeah.
Like for example, it ultimately got cut, but we were in our last set. We were supposed to have a whole tutting section. We have a guy who's like really great at that stuff. He's like great at tutting, popping, waving, all of that, and he was supposed to kind of be like the center of it all. And we are all like super excited for him to be in the forefront. I think ultimately, just like when we stand back and look at the whole piece, maybe it just wasn't the right time or maybe the right space for it. And so I guess it kind of sucks that it was a loss in that sense, but the rest of the set, you know, felt very cohesive. I even got called on to choreograph, which was crazy to me because I just came into this. But I guess even from before that, so I guess put this into perspective, I got to teach the team before even being on the team as like a guest choreographer, like guest trainer, I guess. They're always pulling choreographers in to, I guess, expose the team to different facets of dance, different genres. And so Step was one of them. And I taught a whole workshop last year, like last December. And then fast forward to our competition, which was also in December of 2024. I had a whole like step section that a lot of my teammates felt like that was a push in the right direction, a push that may or may have not got us the win because we got first place at that competition. So, and you know, it was great to receive that kind of feedback. I don't think that was solely why we won. I think going back to community, like kind of just appreciating our differences while also still, you know, falling in line with the team aspect of it all.
Yeah. But don't sell yourself short either.
Oh yeah, no.
Because clearly, like, that was a part of what won, or, you know, first place. And I think you can have a little confidence in that and own that. You don't have to sell yourself short. Clearly, it helped.
I mean, I think it's still super dope. I'll talk about it.
Yeah, as you should. Brag about yourself. Come on.
But yeah, I think part of it too is just when it comes to community, like I feel like I'm ride or die for them, you know? Like I remember kind of just being like on the outside looking in and just being like, yeah, like they're super dope. Like not necessarily I wanted to be a part of them, but like and I'm totally appreciative that I am, but at the same time, I was like, wow, like that's something I aspire to. Like I appreciate everyone that was on the team at that time. And a lot of those folks are still on the team. So like sometimes I'm still trying to wrap my head around how I'm dancing with them. Not necessarily from, like I know my strengths, but I guess sometimes you do fall into that, you know, you're comparing the things that you can compare, I guess. And we always talk about like healthy competition, but then there's like that thin line of like what's healthy competition, what's just like knocking yourself down over like not being them. So, but ultimately, it's been a great experience so far. We're coming up on our next competition in April, so um, yeah, like a lot of growth still to come, and um, even my director is still growing, and I think I appreciate that she's very transparent about that. Like the whole like ops team is very much like, especially I think this year is that line of transparency is something that they are really holding on to. Very, yeah, because it just grounds us, and so it kind of just lets us remember like, hey, like we're all human, and but at the same time, like, you know, let's just really do this thing, you know.
Yeah. I loved how you said, you know, you're still growing and they acknowledge that they're still growing. I think like I love that mentality, and I'm very much of the idea of even when I am like in my 90s, you know, on the cusp of my deathbed, like I still want to have more to learn. And I never want to feel like I am, even if I feel I'm a master of my craft, I want to still feel like I can learn from other people. So I loved that you said that.
So we have some mashed potatoes with blackened salmon, seared scallops, a shrimp creole sauce, and veggies are going to be asparagus and a Romanesco cauliflower mix.
A Romanesco.
This
This
looks
cauliflower.
incredible.
Yes,
I love you. Oh my God.
I think this is an easy question for those who work in fashion on the table or adjacent. I think with the recent decisions made by the administration that we so largely loathe.
Oh, you mean our king?
You mean our king?
Feel free to cut that if you need to, but you mean our king?
In our non-elected court.
Our king? That was good. That was funny. Carry on.
We see in all the news, a lot of the companies are just you know, just removing DEI initiatives. And I can say for myself, for the after party, that is a big concern. Ladies and I have not got a chance to talk about it officially yet, but given the fact that the idea of the after party was to present or create a space for Black and brown creators to network or people who are inspiring to become fashion, it's alarming when you see a bunch of companies are falling back on it. Again,
For
goes back
no
to-
reason, too. Carry on.
I can't even say it's no reason. I can't say that because I always thought it was performative bullshit.
Well,
And
yeah.
It is.
It was.
It is.
And it is.
They
It's
did it.
really, they have the cop out now.
I feel like the flip side too is that they're scared to kind of go against the grain too.
I mean, most of them put it in place after George Floyd's murder.
Something I always tell people is that the most I had ever been booked in my life was after the Black Lives Matter protests. Ever. Like, I think it was because there was just a call for visibly Black people to be in these places. So, like, you know, I'd say usually a lot of the industry, like, because colorism is a thing, they will, if they're booking like a Black model, it's usually going to be like a lighter Black model or like somebody a little more racially ambiguous. And I feel like after Black Lives Matter in particular, like, I had never been so booked in my life. And then it's on the flip side though, you know, now that DI and things like that is being rolled back and it's not in the forefront of like the conversation, I've definitely been booked less. And it's like very interesting to see how performative it really is. It is. If it's not trending, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. When people have the opportunity to bow out without consequence. When in reality, there is an aspect of consequence, but without consequence, it's very telling who will do what when it really matters.
And they'll just cop out. They'll be like, well, if we don't do it, then we lose out on our profits, X, Y, and Z.
And like you won't. I mean, you saw that even last year with like during Pride, the blowback on like the Budweiser commercial with Dylan Mulvaney, and like the way that all of these conservatives were like, this isn't the beer of da, 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 da. And it was wild. It was very, I just really, you are often shocked when people reveal like their truest colors, and it's also not shocking at the same time. Of like, you know, I have family that are very, extremely, I want to punch them in the face, extremely conservative. And a few years ago, we were having a conversation when, it was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Alex Newell performed on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And Alex is non-binary. And one of my cousins from the very conservative side started asking, like, is that a girl or a boy? And his mother starts saying, well, he was born with, and I said, hey, so Alex uses they, them pronouns. That's what you need to use. And she says, okay, and then turns back. Well, he was born, and I said, no, you need to use this. It's also personal to me, right? Because I also identify as non-binary. And she says, okay, turns and does it again. And it got to a point, she did it like 4 times, I stood up and I started screaming, which I was so angry. And it led to a blowout during Thanksgiving that then in turn had her husband yelling at me from across the room, I don't need to respect that because it's not natural. And I said, wow, this is someone who's supposed to be my family. Wow. And it wasn't a shock, but it was, you are always, I find, the most disappointed by the people you almost expect it from when they take it to the full extreme.
Yeah, and it probably hurts even more because, you know, they're your relatives, they're
Your friends, your peers, your coworkers,
right.
yeah.
Like, whether or not you're close to them, someone you hold dear, maybe in some facet or another. Someone that, who knows, maybe you may have needed to turn to them, or you just have that nostalgic feeling of like, oh, your family, or
And it's
you're what feels
completely
comfortable.
skewed. Yeah. Well, and I think too, like now, right, as creatives and as marginalized groups, like now more than ever, in my opinion, is when it matters to stand up and say something with what we put out. I think that it is the most impactful when it is life or death, which is so stupid.
Right.
Because like we shouldn't have to scream for our rights to exist, or to even just be heard. But it seems to be that every time something actually happens, it is because it is in a moment where it is life or death. The civil rights movement, life or death. The AIDS crisis, life or death. Stonewall, life or death. All of those, the women's liberation movements, things like that, like Roe versus Wade, Obergefell, like all of these things come in moments of like, if we don't do something, like we're fucked. And I think that in turn, those are the moments when art matters the most. And it is a scary thing to stand up and do something. But I think it really matters. I remember, you know, this is, obviously by the time this comes out, it'll be old news, but it's still pretty recent, the Kennedy Center stuff. And I saw the headlines and kind of laughed. And then I read the tweet that he put out, and as I was reading it, I started weeping. And that doesn't happen to me often with things that he tends to say, just because like he just spouts bullshit. Everything's a headline. Everything is in all caps. Everything is loud because
why not?
Because why not? Because conservative white men are loud. Because it's the only thing they can do. But I read that and I was really in shock because it's clear, like, right now, more than ever, every single creative field is about to be deeply under attack because we are the only ones who will stand up and say something when it matters. And it's a very scary thing. And it just makes me feel more motivated to continue to say things, I think. I'm getting emotional, I apologize, but it's scary. It's really scary. And I think that we have a duty as creative people to stand up for our people. And
Do I feel responsible as a model? Like, I think that's an interesting thought process because I don't feel responsible as a model, but I'd say I feel responsible as just me, like who I am. You know, I don't expect all models to have a voice and have to speak out because, I mean, there's a lot expected from models in general, and then to expect them to have a voice, I mean, not everybody is well versed in things that are going on. And so that's why I say, like, it's not me being a model thing, it's just me being me. I think I've been privileged to have a college education. I've been privileged to, you know, be around people who are starting interesting conversations that are needed to push, you know, the industry forward. And I see, like, where I kind of come in, I talk a lot about just the lack of inclusivity, I would say, especially when it comes to, like, body diversity as well. It's been very interesting, I guess, the push that I've had to take over the last couple of years. Like, I definitely used to be more like walking in shows and, you know, going to show castings. But I'd say since the rise of just Ozempic, to be completely honest, and like just the change of tide, like, let's be honest, Kim K removed her butt and then everyone wanted to be skinny all of a sudden. And it's like kind of like weird, like what's going on with the fashion industry of like, what was deemed acceptable at some point is like now like less acceptable. Like I think, yeah, like we can all say like, I feel like we've seen that skinny is in. Like
back.
it's
And that's
back.
very concerning.
Yeah, like it's now it's the trend to be skinnier. And so like that's something that I see and it affects me because it just cuts down my opportunities as a curve model to be in shows and do the runway thing. And I feel like, you know, for me, like, yes, I talk about it, but there's also just, unfortunately, not much that I can do as a person. You know, you start the conversations, but at the end of the day, I'm not the designer, I'm not the casting directors, I'm not the people that are funding the shows. You know, everything, unfortunately, comes back to money. And so, you know, I think there's been the idea that, you know, it's more expensive to make clothing for bigger people, or like, you know, these are sample sizes, and so the sample sizes have to be 0 2. Like,
Oh, but not everyone who's going to see a sample sale is a 0
is
or
a 0 or a 2. Exactly.
It's
Very few
dangerous.
people are a 0 or a 2. Like, let's
0
just
and
be
2 is
so for
not
real. Like, that's
the-
not.
the typical.
Yeah, that's
There's
not
nothing
normal.
wrong with that if that's how your body
Right.
actually is.
Right.
But in reality,
How-
like,
yeah, yeah, but in general,
if I was a 0 to 2, I would not be healthy.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
hello.
Yeah, literally. And so like that's to me like where when I think about like speaking up about things that I see going on, like that's one thing where it's just like, yeah, this directly affects me. I would say like as a response for me personally, I've been leaning into, you know, wanting to shoot with more like Black designers, designers of color who are opening up spaces for models of all sizes, you know. I'd say that, you know, Victoria's Secret made a very interesting discussion about all of this, you know, like when their founder basically said they didn't want any plus size or trans models walking because it wasn't part of like the fantasy. I thought that was like what? You know, like very backwards, and I think that's part of the reason why Victoria's Secret's their show didn't do as well as like a Savage Fenty show with Rihanna, who was like from the jump been exclusive. From the jump has like, you know,
Total
showcased.
sidebar, I felt like it was just under-organized.
And it was though, and it was like the panels on the floor were coming up. Like there was a lot of things that just it wasn't giving with the show. And it is, and we actually spoke about that too. We did. She did, and like
Tyra Banks is, if I recall correctly from my childhood, was an American's Top Model.
Yeah.
She was literally, is it safe to say she was the face
Yeah.
of that aesthetic?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Or
She's
she
the
kinda-
face.
She was the host.
Yeah.
I think she produced it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the face of that aesthetic.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
Yeah, of being skinny, right?
Yeah.
Skinny model was a thing.
It's not like just skinny, it's the extremism of skinny.
The
And
what?
trying to get there.
Oh,
Extreme.
extreme.
And
extreme.
there, I think within that, like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to, if you struggle with eating disorders, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be skinny if that is what you feel in your life. But you need to do it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And I think right now, kind of to your point, what's really concerning, and I'm sure as a model is very frustrating, especially not a size 0 model, because you're just not, like, your body type is not.
I could never be a size 0 model.
Is it's not only pushing this idea of skinny is in, it's unhealthy is in. Like, I think we may see another rise in eating disorders because
Anorexia and bulimia. Again.
that look is back.
Yeah.
And that is very, very jarring. Because I feel like we had progressed
Yeah. Yeah.
so much, not necessarily to perfection. In any capacity, there's always room to grow and improve within that, but I felt like we had really, as a society, moved into a much better place of
Yeah.
body positivity and accepting, like, curvy bodies and plus sizes, and, like, there's nothing wrong with having that, especially because some bodies are literally just built that way. There's literally, it's not obesity, it's just your body.
Genetics. Yeah.
And now we have, like, flipped that completely, and it's the drastic measure in which that happened is really concerning.
Yeah. No, absolutely. For sure.
And it doesn't
Yeah.
help with social media at the end of the day. Social media will be, it's a pro, but it's also its greatest con.
I know. Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, I remember, like I said, going back to Tyra Banks, growing up watching that a little bit with my mother, because either my dad had CNN on, or I had my mother watching that, or some NCIS and all the shows. So, I was on my mother's side. Either want some entertaining television. And I see that growing, I'm like, yeah, I remember skinny. And then Instagram came, and then Kim Kardashian started getting their bodies done. Everybody else started following the footsteps. Then you got Instagram models. And then thick was in season. Now, unrealistically though, people were doing it through surgery and whatnot. There was only a few that can say they actually did it naturally. That's just how their body were. But thick was in season. Like you said, now it's reverting back. And now there's a potential for more eating disorders to be a high rise in eating disorders. But there's also this
Just body dysmorphia in general.
yeah, body. And now you have social media, where people are just easily influenced, easily impressionable. Based on what I'm hearing you guys are saying, and just based on what I'm imagining, and I'm just thinking the negative, it's just like the rates of that's just gonna skyrocket.
It probably will.
Dramatically.
Oh, for sure.
And that is scary from a health perspective. That is scary from a self-esteem perspective, a confidence perspective. That's something I'm big on. I'm big on confidence. As someone who struggled with courage, as you guys know, when it comes to my own personal endeavors, but I was never afraid to be myself personally. But I know other people struggle with that, and that. One thing I say is, if you lack confidence in yourself, everything that you have put into as a work perspective will just falter as well. And imagine for us as creators, we start to lose confidence in ourselves because of something that's maybe unrelated and the impact in our work. You know what I mean? So, and then again, it goes back to the long-term goal, what we're trying to achieve. It's a lot going on. It's so funny how things are just flipped within 10, 20 years, all the work that we've done to be more progressive.
Comes to the first question about kind of like being a creative and feeling responsible about like how it impacts or reflects like political changes or just like politics in general or scandal, let's say. I definitely think there are definitely some dancers who feel more responsible to Like, I know a choreographer who is just like, we got to be better about who we dance to, dance for, listen to. This person strictly does not want to dance to Chris Brown or artists that resemble that same, I guess, note of or is associated with domestic violence and such. So I personally don't feel as responsible. I think that comes down to, I guess, me as an individual. But I will support those who do feel so inclined to go that route. For example, there was a fundraiser effort through dance classes to raise money for Palestine. And I was so about that. Like I didn't end up going to the classes, but I did. I think I did end up donating. I forget, but at the very least, I did spread the word about those efforts. I tried not to stay silent about that, but yeah, it's an interesting line. I'd say, I guess in my scope, and I guess it's definitely a privilege to kind of just stick to your own, because dance doesn't always feel tied to politics. It can definitely, and it has. Like, I feel like, depending on who you ask about, even Alvin Ailey, like, that's, I think there's an exhibit about Alvin Ailey right now, and, like, depending on who you ask, like, you may get the dance side, or you may get the, well, he was queer, and I could be wrong, but I want to say he had AIDS. I could be wrong, but he was definitely surrounded by that, at least. And yeah, so there's definitely aspects we can pick apart as far as dancers go, but for me at least, when it comes to those things, I think the way I show up is just demonstrating support for when there is grievances about things that are going on in politics that people aren't like super happy about or like are devastated about. I know that, so my birthday always falls around election day. And this year, my birthday was pretty much the day we found out that Trump was like set to become the next president. And we still had dance rehearsal that day. And I don't even think we did anything that day. I think we just had like a freestyle session because that was the vibe. That was like, like use this time to get out like whatever you have going on and like express it through dance. If you haven't had an outlet, use this as your outlet. And I didn't facilitate that, but I shared that space, and I could definitely tell folks were really utilizing that open invitation to do that. So yeah, so when it comes to things like that, I guess I don't engage from like the activist point of view because I feel like I don't always know everything, and I definitely accept that I don't know everything, and I can't be that person to like correct people or inform people, but I'll be that more supportive role. Like if you feel like you're not in the right headspace, or like this is completely what's enveloping your psyche right now, like we can sit in that.
Yeah, I think that matters just as much.
Yeah,
In reference to what his point about how he was talking about dancers are boycotting, basically essential brands, artists, songs. I want to pivot that to the modeling sector because I met a model through a mutual friend of ours, Timmy, and I got to talk to her a little bit and I understand that it's a grind necessarily, and some artists, some of the models can't afford to do that necessarily because they don't have the cachet, they don't have the capital, they don't necessarily. So the alternatives to really boycott or speak out on certain things. And I know one of the things I've seen in passing, certain artists, actresses, actors who have protested and boycotted and spoke about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and they ultimately got blacklisted. You know, until a couple years, you know how it goes. You get blacklisted, you can come back after a little bit. But right now,
Right. Or they resort to kind of leaning more into it and writing a memoir or
things like that.
kind of finding their own path, I guess. But so far in between, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's like things. You get in some controversy, you just disappear for a little bit, you come back.
I mean, it's a privilege to be able to do that. I mean, it really is, because I think of like Bella Hadid, who was one of the first, I'd say, models, probably the first to openly speak about like Palestine, what was going on, to show her support and be very clear about it. And I feel like, yeah, people were not happy. Like, you know, if I think about what have I seen her in for the past year, the truth is not much. I haven't seen her in much, but you know, she can also.
When you're at that point,
She's at that level where she
Just do her
doesn't.
own
She didn't
thing.
need to. Yeah.
To fall back.
Yeah, she did her partnership with Erewhon. Like, she got her smoothie. Like, there's other things she can do, and I feel like that's from a place of privilege. Yeah, you know. And her mom had money, was always in the entertainment industry, so like she can do that. I feel like for a lot of like just everyday models who are like working to pay the rent and don't have a lot of disposable income, it's tougher. It's a bigger risk to be so vocal about the things that are going on. And I can admit too, at first I was like, you know, I don't know, like, I don't know if I should say anything, you know, like who's watching, you know, because at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind who's in power, right? Who's signing your checks at the end of the day. And if they see that you're posting something, is that gonna just, you know, put a block up for an opportunity? You know what I mean? And these are questions I definitely had to face. And like, you know, I'd say like, for me, just in general, I tend to be just less reactive. And so I'd say earlier on, I didn't speak up. And then I would say, honestly, through seeing like other models that like I look up to and admire, I got the courage to. And that's really just coming from a place of, again, like, if I speak up, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be able to make next month's rent because a client might drop me. And like, that's just real, you know? And so, yeah, it's definitely, it's a choice that I think models have to make, like, you know, to say something or to stay silent or to silently support, which I think is something I was doing for a while. It's like supporting, you know, maybe commenting, like sharing things, like donating, but not necessarily like making a clear statement like Bella Hadid was able to make, you know. And so it's a balance. It's definitely something that I've had to navigate and will have to continue to navigate, you know, depending. And then even now, like, you know, thinking about what billionaires are supporting Trump, like, you know, a lot of people have been very vocal about, like, I'm not supporting this brand anymore or this brand anymore because they donated to, you know, the campaign, Trump's campaign and things like that. And I feel like that's where me personally, I can make a bigger stand, you know, like really leaning into, and I mentioned this earlier, like really wanting to model for more like designers of color who are designing with, you know, our people in mind, you know, like that to me has been something I've like leaned into and focused on that as opposed to like modeling for like an Amazon or like, you know, a big billionaire, trillionaire company or something like that. And so it's a decision that I can make at least at this level, but I definitely think it's a tough decision to make.
It is, yeah. It also poses like this ethical dilemma of, okay, yeah, if I do this, will this person drop me? Okay, this person has decided they're going to drop me from this campaign, so is that someone I actually wanted to work for? Do I actually want to check sign from this in the first place? Yeah. But then at the same time, sometimes you just have to pay your rent. So it's a really hard gray area to sit in and to have to sit in constantly. Yeah. And it sucks. And I don't know if there is a right answer. If you feel that you are true to your beliefs at the end of the day still, and those are, you know, obviously rooted in the correct causes, then I think it's okay. But I don't know if there's a right or wrong in that sense.
This is a clementine olive oil cake topped with some mascarpone honey, some regular honey, and some powdered sugar.
Thing that I wish creatives understood about the power of their work is that their impact does not have to come from something grand. Like a lot of what I talked about this evening was about really the community aspect, not even really like the actual creative part of what makes me a creative, I guess, like my talent in dance. Like that is kind of what brought me into the space, but it's not is not what's keeping me in the space necessarily. Or at least like that's not 100% of why I'm in the spaces that I'm in. Like even with my step team, like I don't pay dues. I travel really far, but so I guess I'm not like financially obligated, but I guess I'm selfishly there because I love step, but I also enjoy the people that I'm with, and that kind of fuels the creativity too, right? You know, like I feel like we haven't said it, but we pretty much have, that our creativity is a reflection of our lives and life in general. And it ebbs and flows, and we try to highlight the parts that are good, that are bad, for the sake of art, for the sake of expressing ourselves. And that doesn't have to come from a big project. It could just be like let's say from my perspective, I like a win for me could be that I practiced dance today, or that I felt like I got a new groove, or that I don't know, I saw a TikTok dance and I could easily replicate it, you know, like whether it's skills, whether it's like genuinely pushing your own art form, or just being more unapologetically yourself. I think that's something we need to hone in on and just appreciate, that we can just let art be art.
Don't be so caught up in instant gratification or satisfaction. Don't get caught up in that. Not every. Let me be careful with this. How I say this. I'll say that I think everyone can agree that certain art form has has a long-term impact. Sometimes you hear about it, it's like, okay, you know, or you can foresee the long-term effects of that versus some others. And as it relates to not being caught up in your instant satisfaction or gratification, it's more so be aware. Don't get caught up on it, because merit and impact is determined by long-term success. At the end of the day, when you are long dead and gone, what can people say about the work that you put out, and the magnitude of what it has created for other people, the precedent it set? Sometimes your work may not be the answer to the problem, but it may be the start of a solution.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a precedent, you know. Think of it like that. So sometimes creators put so much pressure on themselves to do this, do that. I gotta achieve this, I gotta achieve that. I need this to happen. And sometimes it doesn't work that way. It takes a while. There are steps that you have to climb or walk upon. There are levels you have to reach. There are, ladders you have to climb. There's so many barriers you have to overcome, and so many successes you have to, like, you can't even get caught up in, like, when those small wins sometimes. I mean, going back to your point, like, take pride in those small wins, like, relish in those moments. But sometimes people take it too far, and they get caught up in those small wins, like, I've done it all. And it's like, no, you have so much more work. You have so much other work to do. You have more work to accomplish. I think people need to understand pace and patience and timing and understanding that, again, going back to what I said earlier about, if you have something that we're all here to build community, right? We all have something that we notice something that there's a need for and there's a want for. So with that being said, it's like, hey, how can we make this everlasting? If possible. Sometimes it may not be something that will last 10 years. Maybe it's 5 years. Maybe it's 3 years. However, what matters is basically the results after it's said and done, right? And you can definitely see that where you may, like the after party, I'll use for an example, right? We're in our 3rd year. What if, for example, this is our last year doing it, right? Right, cool. We'll be sad, but at the same time, we can relish in the moments of things we have accomplished over those last 3 years, right? What if someone that has been to the after party or was inspired by the after party create something even grander, even bigger, and is successful at that? That is a win by a margin. Even if my name's not attached to it, Suray's and Jody's name's not attached, and C's name not attached to it, just to know that, hey, we gave you the inspiration and you created something even better that helped other people, that's big in itself. So that's my thing. Yeah, you know what I mean? I wish I could give an example of something that I either personally came across or that I know off the top of my head. I'm drawing on blanks right now, but I'm pretty sure there are multitude of examples of that happening. So that's what I think people should take into consideration as a creator. What about you?
When I was 19, I was watching TV in college on a random Wednesday night, and I watched a scene in which one of the actors comes out as a lesbian. And the conversation was about how her whole life she tried to be perfect, and she had to do this perfect and this and this and this and this and this, and she had a whole laundry list of items. And then she said, but the one thing in my life I could never make perfect was dating. And then she goes on to say to the character that eventually ends up being her love interest is, I didn't know why before until I met you. And I watched that scene, and I ended up that night weeping in my bedroom until 3 or 4 in the morning, because I finally understood something about myself I had never quite been able to make sense of before. And when you're raised in an extremely conservative religion, and you're told that that is something that A, is never going to happen to you, B, that if you think it is, you can pray it away, and C, that it just isn't real, you have a really hard time feeling seen in any capacity. And that was the first moment that I didn't just feel seen, but I felt understood. And I think in saying that and recalling this, what I am hoping to instill and say is, I think more often than not, creatives do not realize that they have a superpower. Whether you are a writer, a dancer, a photographer, a model, an actor, a costume designer, a stunt man, an editor, whatever, a painter. Creatives have a superpower unlike anything that I have ever seen in this world, and it is to understand the human experience. And I think, as silly as it may sound, as the, superhero traits often go, with great power comes great responsibility, I think you owe it to yourself as a creative to understand what is your superpower in your creativity and what can you say with that. Because you never know who's going to see it. I know I said that earlier too, but I really do believe that. You never know who will see something that you have done, and you will never know what it could mean to them. And it really could have the opportunity to change someone's life and make them feel like their life is worth living and that they're not a piece of shit. And I think that we as creative people should really live in that and own that and step into that truth with pride. And I think that would be mine. What about you?
I think, like, from the model perspective, and I think from my perspective, I think it comes down to visibility. And so it's like, one of my best friends actually told me, she has a little sister, dark-skinned little girl with braids. And, she told me that when she saw my photo in Target, that she got excited and was like, oh, like, look. And then when she got to tell, like, she was with the sister, which is one of my closest friends, like, I know her, that's my friend. I think knowing that, like, if there's a little girl that, like, sees my picture, right, and can see me, like, being lifted up as a beauty standard in a world that tells you that, I'm not the beauty standard. It's like, oh, she can do it, her beauty's being celebrated. Oh, maybe I'm beautiful too, or oh, maybe I can do that one day too. And I feel like, to me, that's the responsibility that I feel, like, knowing that there's just a generation of young girls and guys too who never thought that how they looked and showed up in the world would be celebrated and, put on a pedestal. And so to me, that's like what I carry. I get excited when I get to work with brands I've always wanted to work with. I get excited when I know, like, my picture's going to be up on a big billboard, and but it's more than just I'm being seen. It's really, it's like, someone's going to see me and know that, okay, they can do it too, and know that they're valued and know that they're celebrated. And so I think that's the impact that I carry just as a creative, just knowing that, just through a simple image, something that I don't consider that, that amazing or that big, but, like, that can really have a lasting impact on somebody young who sees me.
God damn it.
I ate down on cancer. I appreciate it. Well, that is the wrap of our shoot. We just want to say thank you again for being a part of the conversation. We appreciate all your answers, responses, the conversation. This is what the InBetween is about, bringing together creatives like you to a table to talk about what it is. So, again, thank you. I feel like we should do a cheers.
Sure.
With everybody.
Yes, everyone, please grab a glass.
I have enough in here.
And we wish you all the best in the future and hope to see y'all soon on the next episode.
Of course.
So yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
To the InBetween.
To the InBetween.